All right, I want you to picture something really quick. Let's just say it's Saturday morning. You're sitting in the bleachers at some massive sports complex, 3 states away from home. Your kid is on the field, 7 out, 12, 13, 14 hours into a weekend long stretch, right? You're wearing a jersey with a number on it that nobody's going to remember, at lunchtime of, what number your kid actually was wearing, but you're there supporting them. You've spent $800 on registration fees, another $400 maybe on your hotel. That's be factoring gas, food, new cleats, because the old ones were apparently unacceptable for whatever reason. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're thinking, this is it. This is the showcase that's going to get my kid finally noticed. This is the one where the college coach is going to walk up, maybe hand you a card, name, give you some more information, say, hey, we're interested in talking to your son, or hey, we're really interested in having your daughter be able to get on a phone call or have her send us an email. So here's what I want you to understand, that this scenario, the one that you've been sold by recruiting companies, showcase organizers, highlight reel services, Instagram ads with dramatic like music and, all the flashing lights, slow motion footage of, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, that scenario almost never happens. Not because that necessarily the kid or your kid isn't talented, but because the entire system was actually designed to take your money, not get your kid actually recruited. So today, I'm going to talk about the recruiting pipeline industry, recruiting platforms, showcase tournaments, highlight reel services, the recruiting profiles for 12, 13-year-olds. I'm going to show you what the numbers are saying. I'm going to tell you what college coaches are actually saying when they're not on, the record or have a camera in front of them or in front of like a recruiting service. And I'm going to give you an idea of what actually works for your kid if there genuinely has a shot at playing collegiate sports and without spending thousands of dollars of having to chase a fantasy. Hey, this is Brandon Smiley here from the Thirst for More podcast, and today's episode is going to be designed around the industry pipeline of sports, hopefully maybe saving families $5, $10, maybe even $20,000 when it's all said and done. Before I go into the deep dive here of this episode, though, I want to make sure I'm very clear that this episode is actually based on a previous episode in which I made content on social media, showing some of the statistics, talking about the unlikely outcome that your kid is going to make it to the collegiate ranks to play sports, getting a scholarship, an athletic scholarship in particular, and that the tens of thousands of dollars dumped into travel sports in the thought that that's going to be a return on investment of getting a scholarship for your child is very statistically unlikely. This social media post blew up. It's one of my most interactive social media posts I've ever had. Now, it's not my most viewed, but it is in the top 2 of my most interactive posts that I've ever had on my Instagram page. And I'm not a big Instagram page, okay? So I want to make that very clear. I'm not somebody that gets hundreds of thousands of views. Most of my posts are getting 20, 30, 40, 50 likes, interactions, comments, whatever. And I do have some that obviously do well in that, but that's kind of like more of my average, right? So this took a lot of people by storm. There's a lot of negative comments, a lot of negative things said to me. I even had harassment through messages, even on my YouTube channel. It got way out of hand. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to just do my research, provide what is available regarding the pipeline of the recruiting side of things and the services and the showcases and what have you. Talk about that. And then also what I'm kind of seeing, again, with the athletes that I work with, the parents that I happen to talk with, right? So the goal here is to present the information. Okay. You can deduct with it how you will. I'm going to present the information. I'm going to tell you what it's saying, give you my personal opinion as well on the whole situation. But at the end of the day, only you can make the decision of whether you want to spend this kind of money or not. And at the end of the day, my goal is to help athletes earn that scholarship. Okay. I'm not telling you that I don't want athletes to not get scholarships. That's without a doubt. The whole reason my business exists is because, one, I love working with kids and athletes. I try to provide a service and an area for young athletes and kids to be able to excel, not only in the weight room, because I believe the intangibles in the weight room go far beyond the weight room, but I also think it helps keep kids healthier, it helps them perform better, and hopefully gives them a higher percentage chance of getting some kind of collegiate scholarship, whether that be at the Division III level, Division II level, Division I level. Division III is mainly academic, but if it gets you better and you have the grades and it gives you an opportunity that you wouldn't have had if you wouldn't have been athletic, it's still ultimately helping you, right? So I do know the majority of the kids that I work with are not going to be the kid that gets recruited, right? I would like to think that based on the numbers, statistically, the kids that come through my facility, we have a higher percentage of kids that manage to stay with us for more than a year and a half, have a much higher chance of getting recruited based on what I've seen in terms of the kids that have all gotten recruited. And I look at how long they've trained with us. Almost all of them have trained more than a year and a half with us over the course of their athletic span. So let's get into this here. And let's first talk about the machine itself. All right. Let's talk about the scale, because I think most people have no idea how massive the industry has become. I kind of talked about this on the previous episode of talking about the youth sports side of it, but the youth sports market in the United States is now exceeding $40 billion annually, and that's 40 billion, okay, billion, not million. And to put this in perspective for those of you that are listening, that's bigger than the NFL, which generates about $15 billion. So your kid's travel baseball league is part of an economic ecosystem that is dwarfing professional football. So just think about that, okay? Now, this is everything that's encompassed in that, okay? Not just buying into the travel sports, everything that entails to be able to do that, the training and the services and the travel, the gas, the hotel, right? All that is encompassed in this. But essentially, $40 billion is being dumped into this giant machine. And all the trends seem to show that it is growing. And if you think about where NIL is now when it comes to athletics and the collegiate realms, you can understand why it's going to continue to grow, because there's more money being dumped into the machine. Now, market analysts project the global youth sports industry will reach over $100 billion by the early 2030s, growing at roughly 10% annually from here on out up until then. Private equity firms are now pouring money into this space. KKR acquired Varsity Brands for $4.8 billion. Scoreability acquired Reitzer. Huddle is buying up companies. We're watching Wall Street discover what parents have known for decades, is that moms and dads will spend literally almost anything on their kids' sports streams. Now, within that $40 billion ecosystem, there is a specific sub-industry that I really am trying to focus on here today. And for lack of a better term, we're just going to call it the recruiting pipeline, okay? This includes recruiting platform and services like the NCAA, Captain U, Field Level, Be Recruited. There's probably other ones out there, but you've probably heard of some of those four, NCSA being a very popular one that I even get emails about. It includes showcase tournaments and exposure events. It includes highlight reel and film production companies. It's going to include ID camps run by colleges and some even by third parties. It includes the entire social media recruiting profile, right? Combined, this entire pipeline and the whole infrastructure itself represents billions of dollars annually that families are spending. The question that nobody seems to be asking is, does it even work, right? Is the money that we're investing in this even doing anything for the child? So I'm going to give you the cost breakdown what a typical family might spend if they go all in into this recruiting pipeline. And a premium recruiting service like NCSA charges anywhere from $250 to $3,500, depending upon the package that you go with them. Some other boutique recruiting services charge even more, up to $6,000 for what they call personalized coach outreach. A professionally produced highlight reel runs anywhere from $150 at the budget side of things to over $2,000 for premium packages with filming, editing, custom graphics, music. You've all seen them over on TikTok and Instagram and what have you. Showcase tournaments typically cost between $100 and $500 per event in terms of just the registration fees just alone. And before you factor in the travel, any hotels, food, equipment, right? Most families aren't doing just one showcase either. they're doing 5, 8, 12 showcases over multiple years. And I'm seeing plenty of kids doing these showcases. I can maybe go on to this and do a rant a little bit later about what's being seen at those showcases, right? But now you start to add in the travel ball or club team fees on top of that. And depending on the sport, you're looking at $2,000 to $10,000 per year for the competitive travel team. Some elite club programs in soccer, volleyball, and basketball, they're even charging $15,000 plus. And these families are often starting this spending when their kids are 10, 11, 12 years old, right? It's not uncommon to see this. And the Aspen Institute found that parents spent an average of over $1,000 per child on their primary sport in 2024. That's 46% increase in just 5 years. And for families pursuing the recruiting dream, you can multiply that number by 3 or 4 times that. That's just that the average parent is spending about $1,000 per child on their primary sport. That's not necessarily talking about just like the travel ball aspect. You think about just everything involved to be able to play a sport, especially having been playing it multiple times throughout the year. So let me do the math on what a fully committed recruiting family might spend from age 12 to age 18. So I'm going to break this down even smaller because my social media post was talking about like from 10 to 18. We're going to shrink it down even to 12 to 18. So we're talking about 6 years of travel ball at $5,000 per year. That's $30,000, right? 4 years of showcase tournaments at $2,000 per year, $8,000. Recruiting platform subscription for 3 years, $3,000 to $5,000. Professional highlight reels updated annually, $1,000 to $3,000. Equipment, private coaching, speed training, sport specific camps, another $20,000, maybe even $30,000 when you factor that all in. So you're looking at a total investment of $60,000 to $80,000, and right now that's just kind of being conservative, right? For families who are all in on this recruiting pipeline. And for me, this is where it gets almost, I'm going to just say like queasy and uncomfortable, is that the NCAA reports that approximately 8 million students participate in high school athletics. And of those 8 million, about 530,000 go on to compete at any NCAA level, any level at all in the NCAA. That's about 7%. 7% make it to any level of collegiate sports. Now, we're going to dive into just Division I. That's about 2%. And those who make it, only about 2% of all high school athletes receive any kind of form of athletic scholarship. So this is not a full ride, just any athletic scholarship. So a lot of those partials might cover 10 or 20% of the tuition. So if you're spending, again, going back to the math, kind of like I did with that previous episode, so if you're spending $60,000 to $80,000 in this recruiting pipeline, you're essentially gambling on that 2% chance of getting any athletic scholarship at all. And that's kind of what ruffled people's feathers in my social media post, was like the numbers don't make sense, right? Like there's the numbers. I just broke it down for you very, very clearly. Okay. Now, the full ride that all these kids are dreaming about, even the parents are dreaming about, the one where your kid's entire education is paid for, that's reserved for a fraction of 1% of high school athletes. Full athletic scholarships exist primarily in Division I football and basketball in terms of like where those full rides are actually coming from. They're mainly coming from those two primary sports. And with NIL, you understand why. And they are the head count sports, is what they like to call them. Most other sports offer, equal based scholarships that get divided among the roster. And so a full scholarship in Division I soccer, swimming might be a quarter of tuition split 4 different ways. Okay. So if you know how the scholarship aspect works at the NCAA, everyone talks about how many scholarships are allocated towards each sport. Now, the NCAA did recently update this to where a lot more sports got a lot more scholarship options and numbers that they could be able to use, right? So that's a huge plus. But at the end of the day, this is how it has worked for a very long time, and it's not going to change. The numbers just happen to change. So we might be able to get more of those scholarships offered, but now you're also talking about people extending how long they're in college, or they're being held back in school, right? So there's 5 years of eligibility in the NCAA right now, and last I checked, there's only 4 years in high school. So there's always going to be a cog in the system somewhere to where somebody's going to either lose their scholarship or lose their NIL or lose their opportunity, because you can't just keep having an extra year of eligibility of people sticking around if most of them are choosing to use that 5th year of eligibility. And here's the aspect that the recruiting industry isn't talking about or isn't going to tell you. They never frame it as that 2% chance. They frame it as an opportunity. They're going to frame it as exposure, as maximizing your potential. They'll use language such as get seen by over 40,000 different coaches, or our platform helped 300,000 athletes commit to college programs. And that sounds amazing until you realize they're counting every athlete who created a profile and later played any level of college sports, including walk-ons at the Division III level, who would have found that opportunity regardless of that recruiting service. So the end of the day, this is just basically smoke and mirrors, using the numbers to make you think that it's a lot more statistically likely than it actually is. And I do want to be clear here that I'm not saying that college sports are bad. Okay, I'm not saying they're bad, and far from the truth. I'm not even saying that pursuing the athletic competition is wrong, that you shouldn't try to go get some of these scholarships. What I'm saying is that there is a multi-billion-dollar industry built specifically on the gap between what parents are dreaming for their kids and what actually statistically happens on the other side of that. And that industry is very sophisticated marketing designed to keep parents spending money. And that's here what I'm going to be discussing today. Okay. I want to be very, very clear about that. That's what we're discussing. We're talking about that gap in the reality that's actually here. I'm talking about the cog of the machine. Okay. Now, here's what coaches in the collegiate ranks are actually saying. And so this segment is going to upset some people probably, because I'm going to share what college coaches actually say about recruiting services and platforms when they're speaking off the record and not in front of a camera. Some have actually said some stuff in front of cameras, but usually they will not. And it's not what the recruiting industry is going to want you to hear. Now, Athlete College Advisors conducted an in-depth survey of NCAA coaches across the Division I, II, and III level. They asked these coaches a very simple question. How do you not like to be communicated with by potential recruits? Nearly 80% said that they do not like messages from college recruiting websites. 80% of them do not like that. Then they asked on the flip side, how do you prefer to be contacted? And 98% of those coaches in this said that personal emails directly from the athlete. Less than 5% listed anything about messages from recruiting services as a preferred method of communication. So the coaches are coming out and saying, we want the athlete to directly contact us. Sounds like ideally through email. And so let's think about that for a second. If you're paying $2,000 for a recruiting platform to send messages to coaches on your behalf, and 80% of those coaches actively dislike receiving those messages, less than 5% actually really want them. Okay, you get better results just sending a good, well-written email from your free Gmail account. And that's not, again, my opinion. That's what the coaches themselves are saying in this survey. And here's a quote from Division I volleyball coach that was shared in an industry report, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, so just bear with me. We don't search those databases looking for new players. We already have more film and profiles than we can watch from athletes who've reached directly to us. A Division II basketball coach has also said, if an athlete is good enough to play at our level, they don't need a recruiting platform to get our attention. They need good film and a way to share it. And even a Division III soccer coach has put it that the only time I look at a recruiting platform profile is if an athlete specifically sends me their profile link. But honestly, I'd much rather just watch their film on YouTube. So how do coaches actually recruit? Okay, so they're saying that, hey, don't send me this stuff. It's basically a waste of time. We want good film. We want to be able to connect the dots between the athlete and what's going on and actually have a conversation is essentially what they're saying. So again, how are they actually recruiting? And so I want to walk you through this because it's very different from what the industry is actually going to claim. Now, at the Division I level for revenue sports like football and basketball, programs have entire recruiting departments with multi-million dollar budgets. Okay. They are flying coaches to all 50 states if they need to. They have relationships with high school coaches and club directors going back decades. They have their own internal film evaluation process. They are not logging onto NCAA looking for their next star quarterback at the Division I level. That's not how it's going to work. Now, for the non-revenue Division I sports and even the Division II programs, recruiting is more source constrained, but coaches still rely primarily on their existing networks that they've had and they've built either through their community or through their coaching networks. So they go to showcase events where they already have relationships either with the organizers or somebody that they happen to know there, right? And they watch film that comes directly from the athletes or the high school coaches that they really trust. They recruit from club programs and travel teams that they've worked with in the past for years that are consistently churning out good kids or developing good kids or have a good knack of an eye of talent acquisition for kids in those club programs. And the recruiting ecosystem at this level is more built on the personal relationships. It's not built on the platform algorithms, right? The coach is not getting on Twitter and just scrolling and seeing what kid's great today, right? They're not shopping on Twitter. They don't have time for that. Now, at the Division III level, things here get a little bit more interesting. So the Division III coaches often have the smallest recruiting budgets, obviously, and they might use the platforms more than the D1 or the D2 coaches. But even at the Division III level, the most effective method is still going to be the direct communication from the athlete directly to the coach. A D3 coach might check a platform if a student athlete, again, sends them a link or, has a way to be able to share that information, but they're not browsing the databases proactively. Again, they're not scrolling looking for these kids. And here's the irony at the end of the day is that the athletes who need the most help getting to the Division III level, the ones who aren't getting recruited on their own, are often the ones paying the most for the premium recruiting services that the Division III coaches don't really even use either. Now, I want to address the elephant in the room is that the recruiting platforms will tell you that 40,000 coaches are quote unquote active on their platform. And so let's see and unpack that word active, right? Now, a coach might have created an account through them 3 years ago because a platform representative either sent them like a promotional email or a link or said, hey, like this is a good way for you to be able to get in touch with athletes. Or if your brand or logo is represented, it may not be a bad thing, right? Athletes may get on there and say, oh, this Division III program is on here and I'm going to go look through and I get the coach's information, right? There could be some brand awareness of that Division III program. Not likely, but if it doesn't cost anything to be on the platform, then having your name readily on there is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. That maybe they've logged in a couple times as a coach. Maybe they've poked around and then, maybe they've never even came back. This is a waste of time, right? I'm not going to use it. And that coach is now counted as active because they've created an account and they've been on the platform effectively. But having an account is not the same as actively using it to discover and recruit athletes. Okay. There's a big difference in terms of what that actually means. And it's like saying that 40,000 people are active members of a gym because they signed up, even though 38,000 of them have never even swiped their card to be able to go in there the past 6 months. Think of Planet Fitness, right? Who knows what their active database is of people that are actually have a membership to that gym, but we know that the percentage of people that are actually using that membership is very small. And you know that because the pricing is incredibly low. It's much easy to let a $10 or $20 membership just keep billing. Canceling almost seems like a hassle because if you want to use it, I can justify it if I go once or twice. I got my money's worth out of it, right? That's kind of the way that this is working from a coach perspective. And again, they're not actually on there actively recruiting and looking for talent. And so here's what's actually going to get the coach's attention. The first one is very clear, in my opinion, is going to be a well-written, personalized email directly from the athlete addressed to the coach, right? We're not using a template. We're not using ChatGPT. Okay. We're not using a mass blast recruiting services where you're just going to send it to every single coach that you have and say, hey, coach, here's my information, right? You're going to individually write the email to that coach from you, from the top of your head, and try to be able to actually spark a conversation, show your interest in the university, and maybe, quote unquote, sell yourself. It's going to be an email that's going to show that the athlete has researched the program. They understand why they believe they would be a good fit, not only in that program, but to represent that university or college. And it's going to include a direct link then to their film of however they happen to do that, YouTube or Huddle or whatever. The second one is going to be a recommendation from a high school coach or a club-based coach that the college coach already knows and trusts. Okay, maybe they played together. Maybe they have a friend of a friend, right? Maybe they're an alumni and you've got some kind of connection there. The coaching networks are absolutely everything when it comes to the recruiting side. And I hate this to be that way, but a lot of times this stuff is still about who do you know, right? That's going to be a big piece of it. Number 3 is going to be attending that specific program's camp. So not a third-party showcase with 200 athletes, right, on all these different fields. You're going to go to the school's actual camp where the coaching staff can evaluate you in their system and in their environment. All right, and hopefully if you've sent that personalized email, maybe you got a coaching connection somewhere, right? You're starting to connect all these dots. So when you show up to the camp, they're more likely to be able to be like, okay, this person has already reached out. They showed interest. They might be a good fit. They've got a good GPA, right? They might pay more attention to you, and they are going to pay more attention to you, and they can actually see you in human physical form, which I think is definitely important to some degree, right? You can't just blindly go do this, just sign up for a camp and cross your fingers, right? You got to do those personal things first, especially if you want to be on their radar. And then the fourth one, in my opinion, is not as important, but it can carry some weight, is going to be then competing at the events and the tournaments where that specific coach is already planning to scout and be. Now, I'm not telling you just to pick your tournaments based off that specifically, but it can definitely help you if they happen to be at an event that you're competing at and you happen to compete and play very well. That can also help your odds of getting recruited. Again, not something I would bank on. Again, number 1 is number 1 for a reason on this list. This is kind of in the order of ideally the way things are going to go. And if you've done the other 3, then number 4 is probably going to be pretty easy, right? They're probably going to want to come check you out. Hopefully they've already had a personalized connection, and you can reach out again with another personal email, say, hey, coach, I'm going to be at this camp. I would love to connect with you again afterwards and talk about XYZ University. Now, notice what is not on that list, right? There's nothing mentioned of like a $3,000 recruiting service subscription, right? There's not a $500 professional highlight reel with a well-edited YouTube video that would accomplish the same thing, right? So a recruiting profile for a 13-year-old, in my opinion, is absolutely ridiculous. Those things are on the list of things that make money for the recruiting industry. They're not doing anything else. They're not on the list of things that college coaches are going to say is going to influence their decision of whether they're interested in that particular athlete. And here's probably the most important point here of what I'm really trying to get across is that everything that a recruiting platform does, you can actually do for yourself for free. It's going to take some legwork. It's going to take some effort, right? But the coach contact information that they're going to charge you to access, it's actually on every single university's athletic website. You can get on there and find out who the coaches are, who the recruiting coordinators are, right? Some of them even now even have specific links that says for recruits. You just click on that and it will walk you through every single thing that you need to do to either get in touch with the coach or get your film submitted, or maybe write an essay of why you believe you would be a good fit and some of your statistics, or they might want some of your stats for some of your sports, right? They're all going to require different things. But I have gone on and looked at several universities, and they do have a for recruits access link that you can click to be able to do a lot of this stuff, and it's going to be completely free. Now, it's just public general information, too, of how to reach those coaches, okay? They want their information on there because they want people to be able to reach out to them if they need to be able to do so. And so that profile that recruiting service is helping you build, you can just go decide to make a free YouTube channel. You can upload your film there. You can create a very simple athlete resume, and you can email coaches directly of just that athlete resume. So when you're doing that individual outreach, you can attach that document. So you're not having to make a document for every single one. You can, introduce yourself and explain everything personalized like we explained, but you can also say at the end, attached is my athletic resume. Here are the things that I've done in my athletic career leading up into this point, right? And you can show how long you've played baseball, how long you've played basketball, all those little things. If you're on those club teams, if you're involved in a strength and conditioning program, right? Or you've gone to these specific skill camps, or you've got your 40-yard dash time measured by an individual. You would obviously want to provide that person's contact information so that if they want to reach out, make sure that you're not BSing them, right? Those are also things you can put in film, but you can effectively have a athlete resume with quality contacts, of professional contacts in the athlete industry that you've either been coached by or have gotten help from to develop. And they might recognize a name, and that might then spark a conversation with a coach. Okay. So just think of it about applying for like a job as you normally would. You're probably not going to just send a regular email out in the cold. I'll be honest, but I have people do it to me, but all they do is just send regular emails. Hey, are you guys hiring? What a terrible way for me to want to hire you, right? You can introduce yourself, explain why you might be a good fit, why you're looking for a position with us, interested in learning about more, and attached is my resume of what I've done. Guess what? I'm probably actually going to look at that email and look at that resume. Well, I'm probably not going to hire them. I'm at least curious. Okay. And that's what we kind of want to do, is make the coaches curious of, is this a kid that maybe I've just not found, right? Maybe I've never heard of this person. Kids are hidden everywhere. We hear about the stories all the time in different university levels of kids that were walk-ons that never got recruited, or they're one-star, didn't have any star athletes. You hear that stuff all the time. It's not uncommon anymore in sports. Kids are definitely out there doing great things, and they're just kind of hidden, again, because of just some of the sheer volume that's out there, and coaches have to be selective. And if you're not reaching out, they're going to go through some of their warm leads before they ever go just digging, trying to find a random athlete that's going to fit their system or their program or even their culture. And then you also will see some too that are going to have like a matching algorithm that they mention or promote. I've seen that stuff. I think that's ridiculous. You can just go to the NCAA website and look up every school by their division, their sport, their location, their academic profile, and that's all for free. Okay, everything I've listed you can do absolutely for free. It's just going to require some legwork on the athlete's end. And if you're a parent and you're listening to this, if your kid is a junior or senior or even a sophomore, right, make them do this. This is not something you do for them. If you want to proofread their email, right, you maybe want to read things over for them and give a suggestion here or there, right? That's fine. But do not write their email. Do not create this athlete resume, right? If you got to be the parent that's like filming, obviously they're playing sports, like that's one thing. But I'm trying to be very clear here is that parents, this is not something that you can do for your kid. Your kid's got to do it because they want to do it. And it's going to be very clear to the coach whether mom and dad helped write this email or the kid wrote the email. I can tell you firsthand right now, I can definitely tell the difference of who's writing the emails, at least on my business side. And I know it's not going to change if they're writing to a coach. Again, also, don't use ChatGPT to write your email. They will see right through that. If this many kids are emailing them and everybody's using ChatGPT, all the emails are going to look pretty damn similar. You want your email to stand out. You also want to be personal. Write it your damn self. Now, there are situations where a recruiting service adds genuine value. I don't think so. I personally don't think so. It could be possible, but I don't really think it's actually still worth it. Now, for families that might be completely overwhelmed by the process and have zero connections to any kind of college coaching world, right? That this is all just so new to them. They never thought their kid would even be remotely possibly have the talent to be recruited. Then I think maybe there's something there, right? It might be worth something to get something started, but I would not do like a subscription plan. The value isn't in the platform itself that's providing this, right? It's going to be the education side of filling all this stuff out and figuring out how it all works. And then you can get that education, again, from free sources online, this podcast being one, but you can just do a simple Google search. There's other websites out there talking about this now. There's other coaches and professionals talking about how to get recruited. If they're charging for it, don't pay it. And you'll be able to get other resources from your kid's high school coach, ideally, right? Or if I'm doing like a single consultation with somebody who actually understands the process. Maybe they were a high school or a college athlete. Maybe they were assistant or a GA, right? Try to find somebody who's been in that college network and see if they can help you out and figure out what you need to do first before you go paying somebody to do it, right? You're not going to need a 3-year subscription. That's what I really want you to understand here. You might maybe need it to get going. Again, I really don't think you do, but if you do really possibly do this, that's the only way that I would recommend anything like this. I also want to say this directly to the coaches that would be listening, because I know a lot of you are obviously strength and conditioning performance coaches, personal trainers, whatever, that work with high school athletes and middle school athletes. We have an obligation here, right? If a family is telling you that they're going to about to drop thousands of dollars, or they're interested in doing a recruiting service, or ask you your opinion of a recruiting service, you need to have an honest conversation with them. You need to ask them, again, if they've emailed coaches directly. Ask if their high school coach has any kind of connections whatsoever. Doesn't even matter if it's a university they're interested in, at least to see if you can find some connections. And then ask if the athlete has made a simple highlight film over on YouTube or again our channel. Well, again, a lot of kids are using Huddle. I don't even know if Huddle charges, but whatever that you're able to do to be able to put some film together, if at all possible. We don't want to let the family spend money on something that they can do for themselves just because the company has good marketing and they're trying to make things appear easier, like you don't have the time. You can make the time. It's not that hard to send off a couple emails, especially once you start getting some connections into this. All right, we're going to move on to this third part here. That's going to be talking about showcases and the exposure events, because I think that's where a lot of money goes and where a lot of the false hope can really kind of start, if I'm being honest. Now, the showcase tournament model, here's how it's going to work. That an organizing company is going to set up like a multi-day either tournament. They charge each team or individual athlete a registration fee and markets the event as a college exposure opportunity or a college exposure camp, something like that. They'll advertise that college coaches will be in attendance at this event. Sometimes they'll even list the schools. They'll put their logos on there, right? Nice and big. Oh, here's going to be XYZ University. And sometimes they'll even list the coaches that are coming if they have to be prominent coaches. And parents see that and they think, if I can get my kid to the showcase, they're going to be seen by Division I coaches. And let's break down what the math on what a typical showcase actually looks like here. So let's say that showcase tournament has 64 teams, which is like a mid-sized event. I'm close to Indianapolis. I've been up there. I've seen what they kind of do. And each team has 15 players. That's 960 athletes at this one event. So almost 1,000 athletes. And let's say that 12 college coaches are in attendance at this, which would actually be, a pretty decent turnout. 12 coaches watching 960 athletes across multiple fields over 2 to 3 days, right? Start to think about that math. Each coach might genuinely evaluate maybe 20 to 30 athletes in that time, and players that they already had on their radar are the ones they're there to see. They're not looking for the random 920 or 930 kids that they have no idea who they are. There's 20 or 30 kids that have probably either emailed or they're there to actually physically see in person, and they were either recommended, again, or they've already got a high star level, right? They're already being pushed by these really big organizations. We know they're popular. We know they're good. They at least got to get their eye on them, even if they may not have a chance, right? They at least got to shoot their shot. Or they're also seeing players competing in the games that they happen to already be watching. They went to see this kid, maybe 2 kids on this team. There's other kids playing, so they're going to see some of these other kids, but that's really not who they're there. But who knows? Maybe a kid has a standout game. Maybe it draws some attention to their eyes. So again, out of those 960 athletes from that math that we just kind of made up, that maybe 30 to 50 actually get genuinely evaluated by a college coach. So that's 3 to 5% of the athletes that are actually at the event. And being evaluated is not the same thing as being recruited, right? That's not the same thing. Being evaluated means that a coach once watched you play, and maybe they took some notes. Maybe they wrote your name down to do a little bit more research, right? But the actual recruitment process is where a coach follows up. The coach is going to start a conversation. They're going to invite you to campus. that happens to maybe 5 to 10 athletes out of an entire event like that if they haven't already met with them or don't already have an offer already existing to come do that. So you're basically looking at like a 1% chance, probably even less. But here's the thing is that every single family at that showcase paid the registration fee. Every single family traveled. They paid for their hotels. They paid for their food, right? The showcase organizer collected somewhere between $50,000 to $200,000 in registration fees, depending upon the event size and the sport that's being played. And the organizer's financial success has absolutely nothing to do with whether any of those athletes actually get recruited. The business model is selling the hope and the dream. It's not selling the outcome. Now, here's what makes this even more problematic, in my opinion, is that the coaches who attend the showcases are usually going to see specific athletes they're already tracking, and they're not showing up open-minded, hoping to discover the next superstar on the field, right? That's not what they're going there for. They're not hoping to run into somebody. They're going there for a specific reason, more cases than not. Probably 99 out of 100 times. They made the trip because they know that athlete X is going to be at this event and they want to see athlete X play in a competitive setting. The other 959 athletes, other than athlete X, are at the event essentially providing the competitive backdrop to display for athlete X, right? They're providing everything so that athlete X can be there and be in attendance, right? They're extras in the edition that you're not even going to use. And here's where some of the conflict of interest gets really clear is that many showcase companies also sell recruiting services. They sell film packages. They sell these premium athlete profiles. So the event itself becomes a lead generation tool to get you to keep coming back and spending more money. So you're going to go to the showcase. Your kid doesn't get noticed. Oh, well, what are you going to do, right? So you're going to send up a follow-up email. Hey, I want to make sure coaches see your athlete, right? That's what the recruiting things that say, hey, thanks for coming. Maybe nothing happened. We want to make sure that you happen to get seen. You can update to this profile recruiting thing. And, it's only $999 for the whole year. And, the showcase opens this up as something that you can sell. And hey, we have that coach's contact information. We'll send your profile over to that coach. Well, yeah, you're sending everybody's. They're probably not going to even open the damn email. So the showcase was essentially just a front door to their overall sales funnel, and you just paid for the event, right? So now you're paying for the privilege essentially to be sold to, and then they cross their fingers that you do get duped into it and buy into it, right? It's just a lead generation tool at the end of the day to get you to buy more stuff. They're just trying to get you to spend more money on the pipe dream. And I think it's really clear too here that I distinguish between actual legitimate exposure events and the showcase industrial complex because there is a difference here. Now, a camp run by a specific college's coaching staff at their own facilities is actually a legit recruiting opportunity. You might be asking, well, why is that? Well, it's because the coaches are evaluating you for their program. They're watching how you respond to their coaching, right? You're there to get some help, and they want to see how you're interacting with them, right? That's the good thing about going to the actual university itself. If they happen to have some kind of camp or exposure thing, usually there are limited, right? It's not like unlimited amount of people can show up. And they could potentially be assessing your fit if you are good enough to stand out. You're interacting directly with that staff, right? They could potentially be coaching you. Hopefully, again, you sent that email well before the event. And so that's actually real exposure that can actually have real potential for a real outcome. Now, again, it's still statistically low, right? If you're a kid, maybe in a Purdue guy, let's take a seat, for example, I would love if my son wrestles. I'm not going to make him, but I really hope that I can influence him to do that. If he wrestles and we go to Purdue wrestling camps, especially as he gets into high school and he happens to be going to those, if he's good enough, he's going to be interacting with the coaches or whatever, that could potentially open a door. If he's not good enough and he's getting his ass beat all over the mat by every kid that's out there, he's not going to get recruited. Okay. There's going to be your normal standard bell curve, there's going to be that 10% of kids that are at that camp that are going to stick out like a sore thumb. And those coaches are probably going to talk to those kids more than anybody else. But you kind of don't know until you show up. Now, to be honest, if you know your kid is not good, like if they want to go to camp and have fun, that's one thing, right? Speaking of wrestling camps are incredibly fun. I did wrestling camps and they made me a better athlete. And I went there to be a better athlete. I didn't go there to be recruited. But if you know that your kid does not have that outcome, right? If they're using wrestling as an example again, if they're a sophomore and they don't even have a 500 record, right? They're not getting recruited. Let's be real. But if your kid is 35-1 as a sophomore, ended the year, with a tough loss or whatever, like, okay, there's some real hope and potential there, right? He's not getting beat up on. He probably can actually perform well. So context does matter. But I do really trying to use this as an example is that the university events can open some doors, especially at a much higher percentage than you would if you go to these giant exposure camps with these, thousands of kids and all these fields and all these coaches are present. You're not going to have as good of a chance at those. And so the third party showcase where the 500 athletes again are competing on all the different fields and the college coaches are in attendance or whatever. And maybe there's even sending graduate assistants there that, you never heard of. They're just there to wear the quarter zip with the logo. And people are like, oh, look, IU's coach is here or a guy from IU staff is here. You don't even know who he is, right? He probably has no say, right? He's showing face. Maybe he's got his eye on a couple guys for the head guy, and that's really kind of it. I think that's an entirely different thing. And that's an event designed to collect the registration fees from the families and to facilitate genuine recruiting connections through your money and get you to upsell these services and just to overall generate revenue. They're not there to facilitate actual genuine recruiting. And there's also a tier system within these showcases that I also think many people do not understand is that the top tier events in each sport, so like your perfect game ones in baseball or your prep volleyball showcases or your ECNL and MLS next showcases in soccer, those events do have significant coach attendance because they've built reputations over decades and they're selective about which athletes can even participate, right? It's not like just anybody can go into those. Chances are these are going to be an invite only, or you have to have a way to get into the event. You can't just buy your way into it. And so if your kid is invited to one of these events, that's also a different conversation. But the 500 other showcases and combines and exposure events that just pop up every year by these random places, most of those are cash grabs that are riding on the coattails of actual legitimate events. Okay. So if you're, again, that's another thing I want to make clear. If your kid is actually getting invited to select showcases and select things, those are potentially worth doing. And I would argue that you at least do one or two of them if you get asked to do a couple of them, because the powers that be know that your kid is actually good enough to be there because you're getting an invite. You're not just being able to pay and walk in whenever you want to. So my practical advice here for families that would be navigating the showcase landscape is that before you go sign up for any kind of showcase or outing or whatever you want to call them, if you can get a hold of the coaching staff on the schools that you're interested in and ask them directly, are you sending coaches to this event? Which events do you actually attend? Or, something along those lines. What events are you guys trying to go into? Or maybe the kid sends an email, hey, I would like to, have you guys see me in person. What events do you guys like to go to? I will sign up and register for that if possible, right? Again, that's creating a genuine conversation, trying to create some actual networking, actually communicating. That phone call or that email could save you obviously hundreds of dollars and multiple wasted weekends from going to things that are not going to matter, especially if you're really sold on a particular university that you think you might be a good fit for. So if a showcase can't tell you exactly which coaches from which schools are even attending, that should also be a major red flag. And if the coaches from your target schools are not going to be there, then why even bother going to do it, right? It's not like that percentage chance is going to be in your favor, especially for the amount of money that you're going to be spending. And the other piece is really kind of this, that if you're going to invest in any exposure opportunity, that you need to invest in those specific school camps, right? Attend a prospect camp at the schools that your kid actually wants to attend. probably has a realistic chance or maybe an actual potential chance to maybe even actually play at. Okay. Once your kid actually starts to be around other universities and other kids and the other camps, then you'll quickly know, because if they're standing out at a Division III camp, okay, maybe they're a Division II level talent then, right? Maybe they can go up to something that's a little more challenging. If you're not getting noticed at anything, then you're probably at the wrong camps. And it should be that going to those university ones too, that they obviously are more targeted. And it's also usually cheaper because that money is going directly to the university, which they will use in their athletic department. And the evaluation side is also usually direct if they happen to be working with that coach at a station or something like that. Now, one prospect camp at your top choice school is worth more in that case than doing 10 generic showcases that are just randomized. That we're going to have 20 coaches show up from different universities, right? It's going to be worth it way more than any of those. Okay, now we need to talk about the highlight reel aspect of it and the social media recruiting profile side, because in my opinion, I've gotten really out of control. I don't like seeing it. I'll be very blunt and very quick here on this portion of it, that coaches are not on Instagram looking for the next athlete. Okay, they are not. They are not there looking, I assure you. The kids, if they want to do it for the hype, that's one thing, right? Or if you do manage to get recruited from a certain university and you want to put offered or whatever, you did an official visit, that stuff's all great, because I do think that if you can put those on like your X and your Twitter account or whatever, where you have a compilation of schools that are interested, now you maybe have a bargaining chip with other schools, right? If what I tell a lot of the kids is that if Ball State recruits you, chances are other MAC schools will start showing interest in you because that is their direct competition. Now, they may decide, hey, you're not for us, and that's okay. But chances are one or two other schools in that conference are probably going to consider looking at you, maybe even get a hold of you, see if you want to come to a visit, check out the university, meet the coaching staff. Because if you are a good talent, theoretically, if you are a good talent, they don't want you to go to the opposition, right? They don't want you to go to the opponent. They would much rather have you on their roster than be on the opponent's roster. They want to, right? So that is a benefit, especially to smaller Division I and even Division II, Division III schools, is that once one offer kind of comes in from one of them, it's going to be much easier to leverage that into other opportunities as well. Now, before I got onto that tangent about the highlight reels, getting into that, let's kind of talk about them. So the highlight reel industry of this is a more recent business model, obviously, because of social media and how social media has really grown, especially in the athletic realm of things. And companies charge anywhere from $150 to over $2,000 to produce a professional highlight video for high school athletes, which I think is just absolutely insane. And some companies will even come film your games for additional fees. So they'll try to actually get game time footage for you with better quality cameras and all that kind of stuff. And what they're trying to pitch is obviously very clear here, is that coaches don't have time to come watch every single athlete. So you need to have a professional quality highlight reel that can help you stand out. And on the surface, it actually can sound kind of reasonable. If you get on Instagram, the content that usually sticks out to you, it gets pushed more, is usually filmed on like a quality camera, has quality audio, quality lighting, right? Everything looks great. The stuff that's just most of the time just shot filming yourself with your regular phone under no special circumstances doesn't typically do as well in terms of the reach and the engagement. That does seem reasonable. So I do understand that. And video is genuinely important in modern recruiting. Coaches are watching film. Okay, that is happening. But here's what the highlight reel companies are not telling you, is that most college coaches would prefer to watch it raw, unedited game footage over a polished highlight reel. And you might be thinking, well, why is that? Wouldn't they want to be able to see stuff better? Have a better quality experience watching you do your thing? And it's because the highlight reel only shows your best moments, right? You're cherry picking all of your stuff that you're using. And every athlete is going to look good in a highlight reel. And that's kind of the whole point, right? If you look bad in your highlight reel, you're doing something wrong. So it's why it's called a highlight reel. And a coach can't evaluate like something, say your decision making or your effort on plays that maybe don't go your way, or your body language when things are getting really freaking hard, or maybe after you lose a game, or just your overall game awareness from the whole weekend, right? That's why they like to go in person, right? So there's a lot of different things that they're looking for outside of just the highlights of your athleticism or you hitting a home run. Congratulations, those are getting hit every single baseball. Like there's hundreds of home runs probably hit every day during baseball season, right? So anybody can have that footage. Doesn't mean that you've got a high batting percentage necessarily, right? That's not what they're after in this case. So they want the full game footage for some of that stuff. Now, I don't think they're watching the whole thing, but they're going to scroll, right? There's going to be much easier to scroll, or you can say, hey, this is when I'm hitting and whatever, but who knows what they're actually going to look at. But they could be looking at that other stuff. The key thing I really want to try to understand here is that the highlight reels, everybody's highlight reel is going to look good. So that's why they're not interested in an actual highlight reel of you paying for this super ridiculous service. And a Division I softball coach on a recruiting forum has been quoted as saying that something that she said has stuck with me while doing this on one of the articles that I read, was that she said she never logs into NCSA or opens their emails that she gets. She said she said that unlisted YouTube links are going to be the best friend for the young athletes creating their recruiting profile, essentially by their own, or their recruiting resume, or their athlete resume, whatever you want to call it. And, that's a coach at a competitive program telling you that the free YouTube link, private link that you're making is going to be more useful than that paid recruiting platform and that professionally edited highlight reel. And multiple coaches from that same thread echoed things from the article that was provided. And I'll have that in the show notes for you. Now, here's a free method that most families are not going to know about, and it comes directly from parents who've successfully navigated this process. It's create a dedicated Gmail account for your athlete or kid, or have your kid make it. If your kid's old enough to make it, do it. But if not, if they're younger and you're making it, make them a dedicated Gmail account just for them, okay? And something descriptive like their name, their graduation year, and then create a YouTube channel with that same account. So when you're making that Gmail account, first and last name works great. Maybe you put an initial, maybe you put a birth year, right? Something along those lines. It's very generic, very bland, but it's very clear about who it is, and it looks relatively normal. Right? You don't want to put some nickname in there as their email address. And then you're going to be able to create that YouTube channel from that same account. And then you can upload your athlete's game film as unlisted videos if you happen to be the one filming it for them, right? They're obviously playing. So if it's on your device, it may be easier for you just to link it, or you send it to your kid and your kid's going to link it there as an unlisted video, and put important information in the video description, right? You can put, the kid should be putting their name, first and last name, maybe even put a middle initial if you've got a really common name. Put your graduation year, put any kind of positions that you happen to play, put your GPA as of current, right? If you happen to have ACT or similar testing scores, put your best testing scores in there. Also put your contact information, put your email address, put your phone number if you can. Again, if it's unlisted, the only person getting it's got the link, so it's not like somebody's going to be able to just drop in your DMs. Maybe you put in your Twitter account, maybe you put in your Instagram account. Okay, you can put in some of those things. I don't think it can't hurt to put them in there. Don't bank on them, but make sure you put that other stuff first. And the last thing that's in there are the social media accounts. And then when you email that coach, you can include a link to that direct specific film, especially if you happen to go in and make like playlists, right? If you happen to do them each year. So if we're using baseball as an example here, in freshman year, you're playing and you've got this film that your parents filmed, you could put it as that year that you played, and you can upload the games or the film from those games that you happen to have. And I think that's a way to keep things organized as well, is because obviously as time goes and you continue to reach out to coaches, you may be able to provide, here's my freshman year film, here's my sophomore year film, here's my junior year film. Then they might say, okay, let's go watch them as a freshman. Let's watch a couple a couple clips. Let's watch a couple sophomore. Let's watch a couple junior. They're going to see, have you grown? Have you matured? Have you gotten better? Has your athleticism improved, right? They're going to look for natural growth tendencies. Are you being, and I think that will help your recruiting as well. Coaches do like to see that. And, if you upload a separate copy of that same video with a unique name for every single school, so you're really, really specific, right? You can really kind of try to play to their hearts, I guess. You can say like, hey, this is John Smitley 2027 highlights for State University. You can track your YouTube analytics and see exactly when that coach watched the video, how long they watched it, and whether they shared it maybe with another person on their staff. And that's more data than any of the paid platforms ever going to give you, and that's completely free. So you can hack this system. Again, going to take some work, but you can use all that data to see if other coaches are opening it up. Now, I'm not going to say that you should create 30 of the same videos and send them to 30 different universities, but especially when you're a junior or senior and you've had some conversations, right? That could be something that can let you track it a little bit easier and help you in the long run there of whether they're actually looking at this stuff or if it's not getting any viewed at all, right? It just got deleted or thrown in the trash. Now, here's where I think this conversation gets a little uncomfortable and where I think I need to address the social media recruiting profile stuff that we're kind of talking about here is that we're now seeing recruiting profiles, highlight reels, the commit pages, right, being created for 12-year-olds, like super young, 12, 11-year-old kids, children who haven't even started to play their high school teams yet, have Instagram accounts in particular just dedicated entirely to their athletic recruiting journey. And their parents are paying for professional headshots, branded graphics, right, custom logos, polished highlight reels before some of these kids have even really begun to go through puberty. And I'm going to be very, very clear about this. A recruiting profile for a 12-year-old is not an investment in their future. It is not. It is not an investment. Do not do this. It is literally just a monument to the parental anxiety that these parents are just like, I'm worried about my kid and being able to be seen. No college coach is evaluating a 7th grader for a scholarship. It is not happening. I do not care what people say. You might be able to find this one kid, right? But he's a 1 in a million, 50 million, right? Very, very minute. Almost none of these coaches, basically none of them, none that I've talked to, are recruiting a 12-year-old or a 7th grader for a scholarship, right? The child's athletic trajectory between age 12 and age 17 is incredibly unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. As somebody that works with kids every single day, all the different shapes, sizes, maturity levels, right, of kids that are these ages. They're all over the place, right? We see kids that get crazy growth spurts. We never know if there's going to be an injury. We don't want that, but injuries happen in sports. So injuries can happen potentially. There could be an interest change in terms of their sport, maybe in their position, right? Obviously, the real talk, burnout. The kid may not even make it to 14 years old, and you did all this stuff and spent this money, and it doesn't even matter anymore. And they could have a new sport they find that they really like, that they get introduced to through wild concept. I know multi-sport participation, right? These are all normal parts of development for a young child, a kid going through puberty. And building a recruiting brand for a child who hasn't even finished middle school is putting adult pressure on a child and their experience that should be about having fun, developing skills, and learning to just love competing, especially with their friends. And the companies that are facilitating this, they know exactly what they're doing, okay? They know exactly what they're doing. They're marketing to the parental fear. The message that they're trying to fearmonger into these parents is that if you don't start doing this now, you'll be left behind. And if you don't get your kid on this platform at age 10, age 11, age 12, whatever, the kids who are on it will have a head start. That's what they're selling these parents. And it's all manufactured It's all this urgency that they're creating designed to extract more money, out of these parents' pockets. And it works because parents love their kids, right? I don't know too many parents that don't love their kids, right? I love my kid to death. I would do anything for him to help him succeed. And they know the parents don't want to miss out. Now, when it comes to this stuff, I'm level headed, right? You're not going to catch me spending this money on my kid, especially at those ages, right? Once they become junior, senior year, this can be a conversation if athletic potential is actually there. But I'll be honest with you, I don't expect it to be. Again, we know the percentages. Only 7% of kids are even going to go play at any college level at anywhere. Move on from high school, right? So we already know that he's going to have to be 7 out of the 100 kids that he goes to school with just to even be able to be in that conversation. That's even if he wants to, right? So, I'm level-headed when it comes to this, and I know I'm not going to do that. But that's what the recruiting services are really trying to upsell these parents on, and the travel ball leagues. And they're all trying to sell the parents into this. And I also want to point out that the psychological impact that this happens to have on our young athletes is when you create a public recruiting identity for a 12 or 13-year-old, you're now tying their self-worth to their athletic performance and their perceived recruiting viability before they're even emotionally equipped to be able to handle that pressure. And so what's going to happen is when that kid has a bad season, or what happens if they happen to get cut from a travel team, don't even get me started on that. What happens when a peer with a flashier recruiting profile gets attention and they don't, right? You've created this public scoreboard for your kid for something that should be a private journey of their own growth and development that does not need to be on the social medias, right? They should be doing this to have fun, create relationships, build skills, hopefully stay healthy, learn about healthy habits, right? Learn to eat well, take care of their bodies. These are the reasons that we get kids in sports. And creating these social media profiles and giving them Instagram and their own Twitter and their own TikToks at these young ages just to promote their sports and their athleticism is not good for their psychological health, their emotional health. They're tying their self-worth to that. We do not want to do that. Maybe it's not your kid, but it is very common, and it's getting more common in kids that they're attaching their self-worth to their athlete identity. All right, there's a whole section on that. I could probably do a whole podcast episode on that if I went and did research on that rabbit hole. Doing my sports psych stuff I took in college and in graduate school in particular, that was something that was definitely talked about. How college athletes in particular tie their self-worth to being an athlete and what happens when that's gone, right? That happens to a lot of people. They can need to find some kind of outlet. But we don't want to start impacting that and driving that into our kids' heads at age 12. That's a terrible idea. The best approach, and the one that actually aligns with how recruiting works, is to wait until at least the summer before their junior year to start any serious recruiting outreach on your own. Okay? If the coach is reaching out to your kid, that's one thing. But doing your own individual outreach for the child, wait until the summer before their junior year. So between that sophomore and junior year, before you really start to try to do that. And that's when the NCAA rules are allowing Division I coaches to initiate contact in most sports. Before that, you should just focus on development. Focus on getting good grades in your academics. Focus on letting your kid be a kid who plays sports because they love playing sports, not because they're building a brand. The irony is that the athletes who end up getting recruited are usually the ones who spend their younger years falling in love with the game, falling in love with competition, and developing genuine athletic skills through multiple sports, not the ones who had an Instagram recruiting profile at age 12 or 13, right? I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but it is unfortunate that I do have to say that. Okay, so I've spent, 40, 50 minutes at this point. I don't even know. Didn't even look at the clock. Telling you what doesn't work. So now I'm going to tell you what does. And if your kid legitimately has Division I, Division II, Division III talent, and they actually want to play college sports, not because you want them to as a parent. I want to make this very clear. This is not because you want them to play college sports, but because they want to actually play college sports. Here's what is going to work best on what coaches themselves have had to say and what I've been able to find. and even just talking to other coaches and other performance coaches at the collegiate level. Step number one is going to be get your academics right first. Make sure your kid is getting good grades. Make sure the kid understands that if they want to go to college, they need to be getting good grades as soon as possible. Make that a non-negotiable, and it's going to be the single most overlooked piece of the puzzle for many athletes. The NCAA has a minimum academic eligibility requirement. Okay, that's across all the NCAA. Division I requires 16 approved core courses, a sliding scale GPA, and a test score combination, and 10 core courses completed before the start of 7th semester. Okay. But here's what most families are missing out on is that coaches use academics as a filter before they even evaluate your film. If your kid's GPA doesn't meet the program standards, doesn't meet the university standards, the coach doesn't care how good their highlight reel or how athletic they're going to be. They're not going to waste a scholarship on someone who might be academically ineligible. Duh, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? So multiple coaches have said that the high school athlete who is academically self-motivated moves up the recruiting ladder because coaches know they can develop athletic talent, but they can't force a kid to study books. They're going to try their best, obviously, but that's something that they're not there to do. The coach is not there to get their grades right. The coach is there to develop their athletic talent and their skill at that sport once they actually hit the university. So your kid learning to build that self-resilience to do it on their own and get the good grades is going to help them in that recruiting process. I feel like that's an obvious one, but you would be amazed at how many parents and kids are not really thinking about that, but they're signing up for all these showcases and whatnot, right? So get the grades right. Number two is going to be honest about your kid's actual skill level. All right. I'm a parent. Okay. I say this in the most genuine and nicest way that I can. Parents are delusional about how athletic their kids are. Okay. They are delusional. To give you an idea, we talk about that Division I level talent. Okay. This is just Division I. This is all Division I, not Big Ten SEC. This is even smaller. This is all Division I. 2%, again, are getting those athletic scholarships. So that means out of every 100 kids that are in a giant gym playing basketball, statistically, 2 of them could make it to the Division I level. So you'd have to find the 2 best athletes in the entire room, and those are the 2 that are potentially going to have the chance to make it to that Division I level. And they may not even be in the room. It could only be 1, right? Depends on the 100 that you get. So just keep that in mind, that we got to be honest about our kids' skill level. And this is always going to be the hardest conversation, and it's the one that most families are going to refuse to not have with their kids. So not every talented high school athlete is a college athlete. It doesn't work that way. And not every college athlete is going to be a Division I athlete. And you go to the roster page of the targeted schools that you're looking at and look at their stats, right? Look at their heights, look at their weights, look at the measurables of the current people that are on there. So one thing I like about like swimming and track and field and shot put, those are very objective based sports. And so you know what kids are running and what they're doing. And so you can quickly measure up and see, where do my times align with the freshmen that are there now? Or go look up, what did they run when they were a senior in high school? Where are my numbers at now? Right? That's something that is very easily to do. It's a little harder to do that in some sports. They do not track as much statistics, but you can also look at like batting average and stuff like that for baseball, right? So you can look at those stats of the current players that are there. And then how does the kid favor comparatively to those athletes? And if your son, for example, is 5'9" and runs a 4.8 40, and you're targeting a Power 4 football program, that's not a recruiting problem, right? That's going to be a fit problem. There's no amount of money spent on recruiting services that will change the physical reality that kid probably does not have the physical aspect to play at that level. Again, there can be anomalies, especially with the transfer portal, your kid can work up, and many kids are working up to those levels, right? As they mature and they get better and they get stronger and they improve. The coaches coached and made them better, right? That does happen. And it looks like it happens a lot right now, but it is possible. So I don't want to say that it's not. They just could be a late mature. But just understand that when you look at those things and you can easily compare. So if we use myself for example, like I'm 5'1", I knew I'm not going to make a Division I basketball roster, right? Duh, not going to happen. Doesn't matter if I was one of the most talented point guards with the ball handling skills. My chance of making a Division I program are going to be super low because there's way too many kids that are taller. They can handle the ball probably just as good as me. They're more athletic. Maybe they got a better shot. Who knows? Not too many 5'1" basketball athletes out there at the Division I level. Okay. So here's the thing is that there are over 1,300 NCAA schools across the 3 divisions. And there are hundreds of NAIA schools. And there are community colleges that also have, other athletic-based programs. And there's a level for a wide range of athletes that you're willing to be realistic about if the right fit is more important than fixated on the dream school. So the families who have the most success with recruiting are the ones who cast a wide net across appropriate levels, and they're honest about this rather than having tunnel vision on just a Division I program, right? So cast a wide net and it will be able to open up your opportunities more. You just have to be honest about, again, the level of what your kid could be at. Step number 3 is going to be building relationships through direct outreach. So here's your actual recruiting strategy, and it's going to cost actually nothing when you actually look at the monetary side. You identify 15 to 20 programs across multiple division levels that are realistic fits both academically and athletically. So I think 20 is honestly for me, I think is a sweet spot is what I would go with. And then go to each school's athletic website and find the recruiting coordinator or who's in charge of recruiting or the recruiting link or the position coach's email address or however you can reach out to them. And then that being free, right? Write that personalized email to each individual coach, right? Not a template, not the ChatGPT. We already talked about that. Write an individual email to those 20 coaches that you're going to reach out to. And write a real email that's going to reference something specific in their program, something that you like, why you're interested in the university, explains all of that very naturally as the kid would. And then in that email, include your academic stats, your athlete measurables. We talk about getting your athlete resume, and then provide the link to the film we talked about with the YouTube stuff. Follow up in a couple weeks. If you happen to not hear back, follow up again a couple weeks after that. If not, and be persistent, be professional, be polite. That's the process, okay? They're getting tons of emails. If it goes a couple of weeks and they don't answer you, it's not anything personal. It could have gotten lost. It could have went to spam. They could have forgot about you, okay? It is going to happen, right? You're a random person to them and probably not a super high priority. They probably will forget. So be diligent. And I would say be more diligent if you know that the measurables that you have as an athlete are more likely to fit at that level. So again, me being who I am, right, as 5'1", and we go to the basketball example, hypothetically, yeah, maybe I reach out to Division I or 2 program, but I'm probably going to reach out to more Division III and Division II schools. I want to be more persistent in the Division III, Division II schools because I know realistically my chances of probably playing basketball at 5'1" are slim to none, but my chances are probably way better at the Division III, Division II level than they ever would be at the Division I. So I could risk being a little more persistent on those schools because I could actually have a higher percentage chance of actually getting there with Division I. Maybe after 3 follow-ups, you just say screw it and you move on. Okay? They probably already got what they need. Now, number 4 is then going to be leverage any kind of networking opportunity that you have, people that you know. Your kid's high school coach is going to be probably the most underutilized resource in recruiting. So use your high school coach, see if they can cast any nets and anybody that might be willing to listen to what they happen to say about your kid, assuming that they're good enough. And, your high school coach is going to have the connections to different college programs more than likely, and then just ask them to make an introduction if at all possible. If your club or your travel coach has relationships with college coaches, ask them to also put in a good word or make a recommendation, or maybe they can say, hey, we can link up through like a text message or something. These personal referrals can carry a buttload of weight, especially compared to any kind of recruiting platform, because the coaches trust other coaches. That's just the way coaches are. Right? When it comes to strength and conditioning, if Coach McManus sends me an intern like he did my intern Harry, He said, hey, Harry's going to be a freaking awesome fit. We interned Harry. Guess what? Harry was a damn good fit, damn good intern. And he's going on doing good things, being a GA. So, those are things that coaches trust each other, especially if they have good professional relationships. It's not saying, it may not sound fair, but you trust who you trust. And it's much easier to do that. And so use your coaches that you have access to hopefully get into some networks. And, you could be just a simple phone call away from your high school coach making a phone call to a college coach, putting you in touch with maybe even getting in on campus and checking out a university. And that's going to be basically free, right? You're not going to have to pay anything. It's going to be way cheaper than any kind of recruiting service ever would be able to do from getting actually on a phone with an actual coach. Number 5 is going to be to make smart, targeted investments and exposure. So if you're going to spend money, you want to spend it on attending prospect camps at the specific target schools, like we talked about those 20 schools, at those specific target schools. And those camps are usually $100 to $300, and you're being evaluated directly by the staff that would be coaching you if you would make it to the university. And so that is the highest return on investment exposure opportunity that is out there that you will ever do. And after that, if your sport has 1 or 2 truly elite showcase events that coaches can legitimately attend, that you can get invites to, or your coach has to recommend you to, right? You might have to be able to connection that a coach says, hey, I'm going to see if I can find somebody that can get you an invite to this, get you there. Those might be worth the investment. But verify coach attendance before you register, talk to people, make sure it's actually something that's actually legit. The big ones are obviously probably going to not be much of a problem, but other ones you want to do maybe a little research to actually know that coaches are going to be there. Number 6 here in this process is creating your own film, doing it yourself. You don't need $1,000, highlight reels. Have parents or friends film your games from the Cyans, right? Use free video editing apps to help cut some stuff together, some of your best moments, upload them into YouTube into a private link, include, again, all your information in that description box. Make sure that the video quality is relatively decent and clear. It shouldn't be hard in today's cell phone world. And then a coach can clearly identify you as the athlete. So you might have to use some of that stuff where you circle yourself and pause it so they can figure out where you are on the film. If you happen to be in a shot that has a lot of athletes, like football, for example, and that's it. Coaches are going to care about the talent that they're seeing on the film, not the production value. That unwobbly cell phone video that your buddy took or that mom took or your sister took of a kid making really good plays is going to be more compelling than a professionally edited highlight reel ever could be, just making average plays with hype music and slow motion and all that kind of crap, right? They want to just see the real stuff, get straight to the point. The 7th step here is then going to be to register with the NCAA Eligibility Center, and this is one of the administrative steps that's actually required, and it's free. So you go to the NCAA's website, you create an account, you make sure that your academic records are submitted on there, and this is a non-negotiable for any athlete who wants to compete at an NCAA school. And it costs absolutely nothing, so don't let any recruiting service charge you for something that the NCAA is actually already providing completely free of charge. Now, I also do want to make sure I put some numbers on this, that the total cost of my recommended approach that I'm saying here, the things you should be doing, the prospect camps at 3 to 5 target schools that you're going to, maybe $1,000 to $1,500 total, right? Gas, food, travel for those camps, and any legitimate showcase events, maybe another $1,000 to $2,000. A basic smartphone tripod that you can get on Amazon for filming, maybe $30, $40, one that's really sturdy. Maybe it's got some different options on it, but $30 to $40 is very realistic on a quality tripod nowadays. Your YouTube account's going to be free. Your email is going to be free. The NCAA Eligibility Center registration is completely free. So your total investment for all this is like $2,000 to $4,000 over the entire recruiting process. Where you compare that to the $60,000 to $80,000 that I kind of brought up on my social media post and the all-in pipeline and Coach Pros, you're spending 95% less and getting better results because you're actually doing the things the coaches are actually wanting you to do. And the best part of this is if your kid goes through this process and doesn't get recruited, you don't have mortgage payments and these giant financial burdens on your future on a dream that didn't actually materialize. So you spent a reasonable amount of money on a legitimate effort. Your kids still had the experience of competing, growing, learning about themselves, having fun with friends, learning about sports, and you still got money for college tuition through a 529 or whatever, and whether they play sports there or not, right? Again, there can be some spaces where you get older, some of the travel sports could be potentially worth it, where that could increase that price. I'm not going to deny that. But if you do all this other stuff and your kid is actually athletic enough to actually play in college, they play multiple sports, they have fun as kids, you do some skills work on your own, right? You learn to go play outside, you practice with your parents, right? You take the pitches with mom and dad, do the fielding with mom and dad, you go out and shoot hoops with mom and dad, and you just get involved in competitive scenes when you can go a pretty long way. And then by the time you get to be, again, sophomore, now you can maybe start to focus on some travel teams, some real travel teams, okay? I think that's where the real end game should be, not trying to do it when you're 10, 11 years old. Okay, let's bring this all full circle now. The recruiting pipeline industry exists because parents love their kids at the end of the day, right? They want them to succeed. I'm no different as a parent. There's nothing wrong with that love for your parent or for your kids. So parents, if you're listening, there's nothing wrong with having that love and trying to give them the best opportunity to succeed. That's a good thing, in my opinion. Like you're trying to be the best damn parent you can be. I salute that. And there's nothing wrong with supporting your child's athletic dreams. Want to be very clear on that too. Not telling you, oh, people are, that's the thing on social media posts that really pissed me off, was that people were saying that, oh, you're saying kids can't dream. I never said that the kids can't dream. Absolutely, a kid should want to try to have a Division I scholarship to Ohio State University. 100% that should be his dream if that's what he wants it to be or she wants it to be. Never said otherwise. Statistically, that's very, very unlikely. It's probably not your kid. I hate to break that to you. So there's nothing wrong with supporting your kids' dreams. Yes, you should support them the best that you can. But love is not a business strategy, right? And the companies in this space are counting on your love overriding your logic of how this is actually going to play out. So then when a recruiting company is telling you that your 12-year-old needs to have this recruiting professional profile or whatever, they're not thinking about your kid. They are not thinking about your kid. They're thinking about the revenue that you're going to put into their pocket. And then when a showcase charges you $500 and promises college exposure, they're not actually guaranteeing that a coach will actually watch your kid at said exposure. They're guaranteeing that your payment is going to process on the registration page of the website that you're signing them up on. And then when a highlight reel company charges you, $1,500 for a 4-minute super hyped up video with all these cinematic transitions and, lighting things and the schools and all that stuff that they happen to put on there, the hip hop and rap things and showing like some of the big hits or whatever, they're not doing actually what the coaches are wanting to see. They're doing what looks impressive to the parents, to the friends, gets the likes and the interactions, but guess what? The coaches don't care about that. And the truth is this, is if your kid is talented enough to play college sports, a college coach will find them. They will find them, okay? Yes, the landscape has changed, but guess what? The kid that's got the insane batting average on the high school or the insane track time or insane stats, breaking school records, has the physical intangibles, a college coach is going to find them. Maybe not at like the first showcase, right? Maybe not through a recruiting platform, but through the actual process of competing well, maintaining their strong academics, and putting themselves in front of the right people at the right time when it actually is going to matter. And that process doesn't cost tens of thousands of dollars like the travel sports programs and the recruiting programs are making you out to believe. It's going to cost effort. It's going to cost persistence. It's going to cost an honest self-assessment of whether this is even your kid and can even apply to your kid when they get to be this age, right? It's about learning all the things that come with sports. And if they happen to have that skill level from playing multiple sports and doing all the things, then it will come to them. And if your kid is not at that level required for college sports or does not make it, no amount of money is ever going to change that. I can't buy to be a Division I basketball player at 5'1". It was not going to happen. So spending more money on recruiting services and showcases and whatever is not going to make your kid a better athlete. It makes you a better customer and consumer for this giant industry, which is travel sports and youth sports organizations as a whole. Now, if this episode happened to resonate with you, you happen to agree with me, anything like that, share it with a parent, share it with a friend, share it with a coach, share it with a student athlete that's maybe in the recruiting process or is looking into the recruiting process. You can share it with a family that is doing way too much and they shouldn't be doing that. And they're spending way too much money on these travel sports and these different organizations. And there's other things better for them to do. You can share it with that coach who works with high school athletes and might be able to help them navigate this and be able to open their eyes, maybe even give them some tips on how maybe they can reach out to some of these coaches or even put them in touch with other coaches if you happen to have kids that are of that age. And if you want more content that's going to cut through all this noise, and especially the sports world, but definitely the fitness performance world as a performance coach myself, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button on this YouTube video. Leave me a comment down in the comment section below. Let me know if you enjoyed the episode, what you took away. Do you agree with me? Do you think this is all out of hand, or am I really missing the boat? And as I said, you can definitely share that link as well. If you're listening over on Spotify, Podcasts, iTunes, whatever, make sure you leave us a review as well to wherever you happen to listen to those podcasts. Leave that 5-star review. If you're able to leave an actual written review, that also helps the podcast out as well. It helps people find the show, and overall really helps me get the word out there. So thanks for tuning in for today's episode, and I'll see you at the next one.